如果你今天去 Google Communication Framework， 你可能会找到非常多不同的名称。那在今天的单元中 Nick 跟我要来跟大家分享一个有40年历史的 framework， 它也是全球知名顶尖管理顾问公司一直在沿用的沟通法则。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管双语沟通力的 podcast。我们希望带给大家最实用的沟通工具，包括了成功人士对全球市场的分享、职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。Hi, I'm Sherry, founder of Executive Plus. As a language trainer and certified coach, I've trained hundreds of managers from Fortune 500 companies such as Dior, Google, Deloitte, and Yahoo.And
I'm Nick, Director of Communication Strategy at Presentality. I've helped startups raise millions of US dollars in funding and train the executives of publicly listed companies to present on the global stage.
Welcome to the Executive Plus podcast,
where you can take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. In this episode, we want to talk about a very famous framework, the Barbara Minto Pyramid. Now, this framework is used today at McKinsey as one of the key ways that they present information and solutions to a client. But we want to talk about how can you use this framework in order to present a plan to your boss. The reason it works is it's very straightforward, it's used by professional consultants around the world, and it really helps someone understand your frame of logic.
那我这边稍微解释一下，我们在第59集的时候还记得吗？我们做了一个单元，那它那个单元我们就提到了 inverted pyramid。 那这个 inverted pyramid 到金字塔的这个 framework， 它其实是来自于这个新闻界，我们那个时候就用了 Jeff Bezos 他的 email 来解释一下这个 framework， 所以大家可能会想说怎么那么多 pyramid， 为什么都跟这个金字塔有相关的，但是其实它可能来自不同的业界，不同的 industry， 它可能名称有一点类似。那今天我们就是专门要来讲这个 Pyramid Principle by Barbara Minto at McKinsey。The
Minto Pyramid is often used by consulting agencies when helping present large plans or large solutions to, say, Fortune 50 companies who are out there doing transformation, creating new product lines. But what makes the pyramid principle so powerful is the steps behind it are very logical and very easy to understand. So then when you present a complicated plan, it's easy for someone to follow along with. It's a great way to maximize the time and effectiveness of communication, especially when offering a multi-tiered plan.
没错，那其实我们在刚开始看到这个 Pyramid Principle 的时候，虽然可能您不是在 consulting 的 industry 上班，但是没有关系，我觉得这个 Pyramid 这个 Principle 它非常适合让我们来利用，我们来运用在当我们要跟老板提案，我们要跟老板来说话的时候，我们该要怎么样去 structure 我们这个逻辑。
At McKinsey, almost every person is forced to memorize and put this into practice. One of our own colleagues, Lenny, who was working as a management consultant and also ran remote teams within IBM, talked about this principle a lot. And understanding this principle is actually quite straightforward. The reason it's the pyramid principle is because you start at the tip top with a focus. And in the case of the Minto pyramid, the idea of your focus is start with the answer first. If you're about to present a plan, if you're answering a question, you should always just begin with the answer. And then you slowly lay out the details in a way that it becomes broader and wider in the amount of things you're talking about.So if you start with the answer first, the second thing you do is group and summarize your supporting arguments, and last, you lay out the logical order for your supporting ideas.
所以如果大家可以稍微想象，那我们在讲义里面也会放这个 diagram， 其实它很简单，就上面就是一个 answer, so it's one box, and then 你的 supporting argument 就是 three different supporting arguments. 那在 each supporting argument, you also have the three supporting ideas.所以它其实是一个非常 structured 的一种方式。And actually today we actually use an example to show you guys.
But let's talk about each of these pieces first. So we said start with the answer first. And the question is, why? The reason that you start with your answer in a consulting situation is because that's what you're getting paid for.
Exactly.
Right? If you've gone through the entirety of the process, you have likely asked a lot of questions, you've had a lot of back and forth, but when you're presenting your final plan, they just say, start with your answer. And the reason is you want to maximize your time with the audience. A lot of times for consulting, your executives, the heads of company, these are busy people, so they're not here to listen to you talk about your ideas for several hours. They want the answer and how you got that answer as quickly as possible. This is also true when you're presenting within the company. People are busy, so if you call a meeting and you're going to present a plan, you should be conscious of their time. So start with the answer first.
如果你今天已经跟老板约了时间，那可能没有非常多的时间，老板可能就只有一个小时的空档吧，或者甚至15分钟时间。So how do you actually propose something that's very persuasive in a very short amount of time? That's why we always start with the answer first. 然后有非常多的 executives， 像老板啊，他们都有比较这种 top-down approach to things. Like they think of it as a bigger picture.When
you're looking at a CXO level, whether it's the CEO, the CFO, the COO, their job is to look at things quite broadly and actually have a bigger picture look. When someone comes in and they just start talking about a lot of details but they don't have an answer yet, you're looking at things in a very narrow scope. But when you're talking to a top executive, it's their job to look at the bigger picture, the bigger vision of the company. So when you give them an answer, it needs to fit within this vision. And if you talk about all these details and it doesn't make sense to them yet, or it doesn't fit into their big picture, they'll lose patience very quickly.
If they feel like, 你可能就在讲一个故事，讲一些很 random 一些 detail, and do I need to hear this? Do I actually have to sit down and listen to this? But yeah, so if you offer them the answer first, then you provide the details later,they'll actually just become more patient with this meeting with you.
Because they know what you're about to talk about. They have a context. The other reason why we suggest you give your answer first and why most consultants go answer first is because it sounds more confident, right? And the way that they give answers is usually quite matter of fact. It's very much a statement. If you give an answer and you're like, well, maybe I think we could possibly do this, and you lose that authority as though you've done the work. And this is not about bragging. It's very much if you've done the research, if you've done the planning, if you've done the work, then you should be confident in what you're about to present. That doesn't mean that don't accept pushback, but it just means when you go up there with the answer, you have to sound like you believe in the answer. And if you did the work, you should believe in the answer.
Exactly. 所以就是让你听起来是你是有计划的人，你是有逻辑，你是会去思考的一个人。You're a person with a plan.
So let's look at the next step. Let's say you've started with the answer first. You've made a clear, confident, and concise plan.The next thing that you do in your pyramid is you group and summarize your supporting arguments, which means if you have a plan, you need to explain piece by piece how that plan comes together or what's the logic behind the plan.
那当然这个时候我们就要运用了 the magic number of 3. 大家一定都有听过在 consulting industry 我们一定都是3个 example, right? 3 supporting ideas, 3 supporting details.So
you've laid out the answer. You have given 3 strong supporting arguments. The next layer is you need to logically order your supporting ideas. As Sherry said, the power of 3. So if I have 3 main supporting arguments, then potentially I can have 3 supporting ideas that boost each argument. So if I have argument number 1,Then I go, okay, supporting idea 1, 2, 3 for argument 1. And then I can shift over to supporting argument 2, and then idea 1, 2, 3 to make supporting idea argument 2 more powerful, and then you continue throughout. But there are 3 logical orders to support your ideas. The first is actually time order. which means if your plan has a sequence of events that we start with A, and then once we finish A, we can go to B. Once B is achieved, we can go to C. Then it's just a time order.
Right, so this would work. 如果你的 supporting ideas 是有时间性的，可能是从 past, present, future, that's part of it, 或者是那种 cause and effect 那样子的 relationship.
It can also be something like, I want to start with testing my hypothesis, doing a minimum viable product, and then full production, because these come one after another.
Right.
The second thing is structural order. Structural order is the idea that something can be broken down into smaller parts. Like, for example, maybe I want to create an entire beauty product line. I could separate beauty products into cosmetics, skincare, and accessories. And then I can give my plan talking about each piece. The time order may not happen, I finish one, then the next. They may happen at the same time, but I need to talk about these separate pieces in a way that logically explains why they all go together.
Right, 就很像，你可以把它想成说，我们在做汽车里面有很多的零件，你就是把它拆开来，那把一个部分就变3种不同的零件。And the last one, the last order is called degree order. So you basically present your supporting ideas in the rank of importance. Which one's more important, or which one is the priority?
Now, this sounds very theoretical. This sounds just like a lot of information. How do you put it into practice?
Yes.
Well, Sherry and I have put together a very quick example to show you how you would take the Minto Pyramid and put this into action.
Exactly. 我们今天就是用了一个 example. It's definitely just an idea that I had because Nick asked me if I were to present something, a plan to our boss. We don't really have a boss, but let's say there is a boss. What would I say? And I've always had this idea in my head that I want to start a fashion line, a business professional fashion line for EP, our EP audience. And then Nick 他就用了这个的 framework 然后在5分钟他就把它画出在我们的白板上面 I'm going to take a photo of this framework, this example, so I'll put that on the handouts as well. Nick, why should we start this business professional fashion line?
If I was to argue why EP should create a fashion line, and EP is now part of our presentality group. If you haven't seen the post of what's going on there, you can check out the Facebook. But the presentality group and EP is based on the idea of professional communication. So if I was to propose a fashion line into a group of companies that are all about professional communication, it may seem a little bit odd. But there's actually 3 very strong arguments as to why this would be great for our company. The first argument is that the way that you dress in itself is a form of communication. The way that people look at you, whether it's first impression or they're watching you on a stage, the way you present yourself, the way you dress, the way that you handle your appearance is a part of communication. The second reason it makes a lot of sense to develop out a fashion line using Sherry's talents is that the audience segment across our podcast, across our consulting clients, is actually the right age group, the right financial demographic, and just the right people who would want this kind of business professional fashion. So we don't need to look for a whole new audience. We already have that data. And the last reason is creating something like a fashion or a clothing line actually creates a more consistent revenue stream to the way that a consulting business works.
So let's talk about the first argument, which is the importance of first impression. Now, when we're teaching and training clients how to communicate professionally, we always talk about verbal, which is the how, the wordings, the phrases, the frameworks, and everything. And also, sometimes we talk about body language, which is nonverbal. But part of that nonverbal also is the way we dress. So basically, we're just putting the missing piece in this big puzzle of presentality group so that business fashion line is our missing puzzle piece.
And this makes sense from the fact that we've actually had clients who have asked us we invited you to go give a speech on how to dress in the workplace because they noticed that the difference between senior and junior members often came down to the senior members were trained and expected to dress in a more sophisticated or elegant manner to show professional attitude and a higher position in the company, whereas junior members were showing up looking very cute. And that, as a company, they wanted to give that very mature feeling. And so this business professional line mattered to them because it communicated their company image. It communicated how they wanted to be seen. This actually gets into our next segment, which is the audience. If we were starting a fashion line from zero, we would have to spend a lot of time surveying, find the right audience, etc. But because the Presentality Group and EP brand specifically has matched through the podcast, through social media, and through consulting clients with a lot of mid to upper management within companies who tend to be within the 30s to 40s and some 50s age range, then the audience is already there. These are people who are in the right position because they want to show their professionalism. They want to show their upper management position. They are financially stable because they're usually higher and up in a company and have more financial resources to apply to their clothing. But lastly is they're very busy. Again, with our podcast, almost everyone listens to it in the car or on the commute. These are people who are constantly going, and so they would like to trust someone to help them make the right decisions, to look professional, but without having to spend a lot of time to go on, say, a shopping trip.
And now the last piece would be consistent revenue streams. In our company, mostly what we do is client works. Now, what client works means is that it's fantastic, but when it comes to getting paid, it's based on client payment cycle. So in order to grow the company, in order to grow Presentality Group, we need a more consistent revenue streams, and this will allow EP, the business professional fashion line is going to allow us to have that consistent payment and consistent revenues per month.
As you can see throughout our plan to add a fashion line to EP, we followed the Minto Pyramid, which is we start out saying we should create a fashion line, and actually by bringing up one of the main arguments, which is for a communication-based business, why would a fashion line make sense? But then our three supporting arguments all boost why this would be good for the EP and Presentality Group name and how it would make sense. Then, piece by piece, we explained in more detail each of these supporting arguments. So it went, we think that it would make a lot of sense to add a fashion line because first impressions are a type of communication. We already have the audience segment ready, and it would help to smooth out revenue cycles to go from mountain valley to something more consistent. And then, piece by piece, we just give supporting details.
那在我们结束之前，想要再提醒大家一下，就是我们的 supporting ideas 还记得吗？有3种不同的 ordering 的方式。那我们这次使用的是 structural order， 也就是把这些它的一些 parts, broke it down into parts, 然后把它放在一起。
We hope that this example gives you a better sense of how the Minto Pyramid can be used to set out a plan, whether it's to your boss or to creating a new business. For more information or details, you can look in the show notes and get more information about how this gets structured, and we'll also link a few articles about Barbara Minto, who developed this technique. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
如果你喜欢我们的 podcast， 欢迎来追踪我们的主管英文 Executive Plus 的 Facebook。那也可以写信到我们的信箱yourcareerplus@gmail.com